All right, we are live. Welcome. Welcome to the Virtual Tech Lab. Oh, my camera's not working. 1 second. Welcome to the Virtual Tech Lab. My name is Dan, and I will be running the show today. Unfortunately, it looks like my camera is not working at the moment, so we will do this without the camera, but we are excited to have you here. The Virtual Tech Lab is a chance for everyone to ask questions and dive in deep into how to use Storj. So next we will dive into the agenda. So what I want to talk about today is what are presigned URLs. And then we will talk about presigned versus proxy, and then we will build a sample Node.js app using presigned URLs. So a presigned URL is something that you'll likely use a lot of the time. The photo app made by Google uses them in a similar way to Amazon, but they are URLs that grant access to data without giving access to everything. So, for example, when you click share on a photo in Google Photos, it will generate a link with this cryptographic hash circled in red there. And that is how you access that image. In the same way, a presigned URL looks like this. It has a bunch of query params that you can view, and each of those params have different names. You can see there's an algorithm, credential, the date expires, signed headers, and the signature. And just like the photo with that credential, you can see that a presigned URL has this similar thing. So why would we use a presigned URL? There's this diagram I wanted to go through with to explain how it works. In most cases, you have an app and a client, and that client talks to your server, and then that server will coordinate with object storage. In this case, more specifically Storj, right? And in the proxy case, you will have the file start from the client. Either the user selects an image to upload, and it will go to your server. And let's say this is like a 10 megabyte image. I'll go to your server, and then it will also then proxy to the object storage. So 10 megabytes both times here. And then, of course, on the way back, it goes through your server and to your client. So this is the proxy case. The pros of this approach is that it's easy. The con here is that server traffic, all of the data is going through your server, and so you will pay the costs of doing that 10 megabytes through your server to the object storage, and likewise when it comes back. And so the presigned case allows for you to migrate that data from going through your server. So here, once again, we have a file, and it's going to quickly go to the server, get a presigned URL, come back with that URL, and then the client will then upload directly to the object storage. So here the 10 megabytes skips your server completely. And this could be 10 megabytes, a gigabyte. In some cases, it's not very big, but in a lot of cases it can be. And so look, there you go. That is the main benefit of using presigned URLs, is the core amount of your data skips your server, goes directly to your object storage solution. So the main pro of this approach is it saves or direct to object storage. The con here is this extra complexity, but it's not too bad. So I think we're good there. Feel free to type in the chat any questions you have so far. I wanted to now quickly show how to implement this in practice. And so, moving some windows around here, what we will do is make a Node.js example of this working. Now I have a generator here, but I first need to make a directory. I'm going to call this my presigned server. Navigate into there, and then there's this express generator that will give me a lot of the boilerplate stuff that I need, but I don't want it to generate a view layer for me, so I'll pass that extra command there. Go ahead and run this. And you see it creates a structure for my server, the public, which is the front end, the routes, which is the back end, API requests, and then the app.js. And so also what I'll need is some libraries to generate these presigned URLs. I'm using V3 of the AWS SDK, and you'll see I have the S3 request presigner and the client S3. So we'll go ahead and install those. And then once that's installed, we'll want to open up our index route. And I am going to modify that a little bit. Whoops. I want to change this to a post because I'm going to pass up the file name of what I want it to presign. And we'll go ahead and call this presign. Next, I will need to implement the SDK. So I have a link here as an example of what I want to do. So I'll want to import the S3 client. I believe it was capital S3, yeah. S3 client equals acquire. Perfect. And then I'll want to set this up. We'll just call it, why not const? Let's just be inconsistent here. All right, and then I'll do a new S3 client. And what I'll need to pass in here is some credentials. These are how you authorize to generate presigned URLs, but here I am going to pull them from my environment so that I don't leak my secrets. It's very important to not have your AWS credentials on your front end, and we'll dive into a little bit more that later, but that is why presigned URLs are really attractive, because they are a secure way to let your front end access data without exposing your credentials. All right, so now I have typed this out. The next step here is we'll want to go ahead and give ourselves a way to load these environment variables for our server. So I'm going to use something called .env. So we'll go ahead and install that. npm install save .env. What this does is allow me to have a .env file where I can simply put my environment variables I need, and it will handle loading those. And the way it does that is I will need to require .env and then do config like so. And just for debugging purposes, I can log that out. Access key. Perfect. All right, so next we need to populate this .env file. And to do that, we'll need to go to Storj and sign up. I'm going to sign in because I already have an account. If you don't, you can try out Storj with our free tier. We have 150 gigabytes that you can use for free, which is extremely generous. And after I log in, I'm going to make a bucket. So a bucket is the top level of where your files are stored. You can think of them as like a folder, but they aren't. We won't go into the details there, but okay. Here's my new bucket. I'm going to call this Virtual Tech Lab Node.js. And then I'm going to enter a passphrase here. And this is the way that Storj makes sure that you're the only one who can view your data. The passphrase encrypts it server side. But what you can do if you need end-to-end encryption is use our uplink CLI. We're not going to cover that in this video, but last time we did. All right, I've now created my bucket. I'm going to go ahead and click access now on the left side. And I'm going to create my S3 credentials here in the middle. And I'm going to call this the Virtual Tech Lab Node.js. Again, I'll give it all permissions, but I want to make sure that this is scoped to that bucket. And I will create a passphrase there. Of course, you want a more secure passphrase than that. All right, so now this access key and secret key I can populate in my .env file. And for my secret, I'm going to go ahead and pull this off screen for a second to populate that. All right, and we're good there. I've populated my env. Next step is to go and fill in this to-do endpoint, so I can do that now. That gives me a copy of those. Okay. All right. So now I have this bucket. I have my credentials. Now let's get into generating a presigned URL. So what we'll need is to do this inside of a try because there may be errors, and I'm going to type some params And this will be my bucket name. And I believe I called it VTL Nodejs. And then the key is like the name of the file. For this specifically, I'm going to get that from the request itself. And then we'll need to make this a command to pass off to the SDK. For this, I want a new put. And I'm going to pass in those params. And lastly, we want to get the signed URL. And that is from there. And I believe it is asynchronous, so we'll want to await. Change this to an async. Get signed URL. And I'll pass in my S3 client, my command, and then there's options that you can do here. The expire is how long this URL will be valid. So let's go ahead and type in a fairly long number there. And that should give us our presigned URL. Let's go ahead and finish this catch block. I'm just not going to handle errors in this app, but we will log it to the console. And then we'll want to respond with some JSON, the URL, and pass it that signed URL. Perfect. All right, now our server is working. We will want to test it just to make sure. So I'm going to start tmux just so I can run the server at the same time as my editing. And the way to start this is to do npm start. And there it's printing my access key, which is what I want. So let's go ahead and get a sample file to copy in here. I'm going to get this storage tree image. Go ahead and copy it here. Then I want to curl for a test. Curl is a way to do a HTTP request. We're going to use a put because that is what we pre-signed our URL for. If you remember that put object command. And then I'm going to pass it some data binary, and then this @ is something I always forget, but it just means that the file path is coming next. And then we'll want to let our servers know what kind of file this is. It is a PNG image. And then that then just needs the pre-signed URL. All right, so I kind of skipped a step there. So what we'll want to do is ask our server, we're doing this step here, getting the URL. I believe I have like a laser pen URL. Yeah, we're doing this first step. So I'll do a post. This will be to localhost 3000 presign. And then I want to pass it that name of my file. And there. Okay. So now I have my pre-signed URL. I'm going to go ahead and paste that up here. And we should be able to upload that storage tree. All right. So now if we look into our bucket, we should have a storage tree. Awesome. So that is the gist of how you use presigned URLs. We went to our Node.js server, we got a presigned URL, and then using that URL, we uploaded directly to Storj, our object storage. And so we skipped the server entirely using that pre-authorized URL. So go ahead and type in the chat any questions that you have. It could be about what I just demoed. It could also be about other things that you're trying to implement with Storj. We will now open it up to any questions that you have. What I also wanted to show is how to expand this to the front end. So for example, how to make it this app client. So we went over the server, we made our object storage account. So how do we create this front end app to use these same presigned URLs? So for that, I'm going to use create React app, and we'll call this presign web. Oh, it's not npm, it's npx. Oh, and I also want to do that in its own directory. There we go. So generating the front end boilerplate, similar to how we generated our Express server boilerplate. This is doing the same thing. And then for our front end to talk to our backend. So say my app is like a static site and it's hosted on like Netlify or something. My server is going to need to handle CORS or cross-origin requests. So to do that, while that other boilerplate is installing, I'm going to install this CORS package. And in my app.js, I will use that middleware. The way I do this is I do CORS, and then it's generally good practice to make sure you only allow origins that you're expecting. In this case, I know it's going to be on localhost 3000, and I'm going to have to require that as well. And then just because I know that my current server is running on 3000, I'm going to change this to 3001. All right. This should be done now. So we can navigate into this presigned web. And if I split my screen again, let's go make sure we restart that server. I can start this one, and we should get our nice, pretty little front end boilerplate, which is right here. Cool. So next step here is to connect the front end to the back end. Oh, looks like we have a question in the chat. Hot Ajar asks, is it possible to host static website in Storj? Are you going to show us how? It is possible to host a static website on Storj. I won't show you how today, but I will give you this link of how to do it. And so the basis is I am creating a static site, so we'll go through that in a second. But once you have your static site, the key to making it work is to set some DNS text records. And then once that's done, you are able to host a static site from Storj. And we are working through getting more ways for TLS termination so that you can do that from HTTPS. Thanks for the question. That's great. Feel free to keep asking questions. That just as while you're thinking, I will finish up this example here. So how to use those presigned URLs in your front end. So I'm going to just go ahead and clear out all of this. Well, we'll keep the header. And I want a form. And I want to make action when that happens. I want a way to upload a file. And let's just add in an extra space there and then a button. And when we're uploading, let's go ahead and disable our button and we'll call it upload. Close out this form. Okay, so we need to populate those things that we just made. So what I want to do is create that function on submit, and it's going to be a sync because we're going to upload some things called the event. And then we'll also want some state. Initial state is going to be null. Perfect. All right, I am going to actually want to prevent the default here because I do not want the form to upload it. I want to handle it myself because I'm going to go and get that pre-signed URL first, and then I'm going to upload. So we're going to head and say that we are now loading. Let's go ahead and do a try. We'll need to pull that file off of that input, and it is a little tricky here, but I'm going to take a little bit of a shortcut and just do it like that. That gives me the file object. And then I will want to have my pre-signed URL server, which is localhost 3001. And I want to pass the params for my server. I'm going to give it the file name. If you remember, we pulled the name off of the request. So now we are passing the key for that request here. And then we'll want to contact our server. So we will want to do a post because that's what we did. We made it a post here, and there's the key that we're getting from the request. So this is on the server. So populating this more, we want to do a post. And the body's gonna have those params. That's closed out there. And then I'm going to just log this out, the presigned response. Like so. And then just finishing out this try catch. And again, not really handling errors, but we can log it. I also want to make sure I clear that loading state. So on this finally block, which means it'll call it regardless of if it errors or not, and set loading defaults. Okay, after we have the pre-signed URL, now we need to upload the actual file. So we will do that with another fetch. Response. I'm going to confuse myself here. So this is the pre-signed resp. From that pre-signed resp, we want to also, oh, I see. We will get the response back, but we need to parse the JSON. So the way that I like to do that is to do another await resp JSON. And now I have the JSON. I can just simply do .url here. That's the pre-signed URL. And then I will do a method put those same headers that we did before with the content type being the file type. And for the body, we will want to pass the file, which does that binary upload that we saw in curl previously. I've already declared resp. That's fine to replace there. All right. And then for good measure, let's go ahead and just log the response here. All right. So, all right. Hagajar says, I will look into that later. Thanks. Hey, you're welcome. And I think for the next virtual tech lab, we can definitely try to tackle hosting a static site from Storj. That may be a good next segue for this one. All right, let's see if this works. A lot of moving parts, and we haven't ran our code for a while, so we will see. This time I'm going to upload this graphic. And we should see in our console that first that pre-signed URL, which we did there. And you'll notice that it passed the name of this photo. And then you can see that we uploaded to Storj. So just to double check that that worked, I'm going to refresh the bucket here. And there is the image. So it works. So that is the demo of making a pre-signed URL. So in summary, we created a server that would handle getting a pre-signed URL, handing that back to the client. We created an app and a client, which took that URL and uploaded directly to Storj. We didn't handle getting the file back out, but it works in a very similar manner. On the way out, download, you would still get the URL, and then that's where this comes in. And then you would use that URL to download it. So that covers everything. I will upload this sample code to GitHub for you to use easily. But that is all I have for today. Next time I will make sure my camera works. Sorry about that. And make sure to tune in next month, every Tuesday. Oh, there I am. A frozen still shot of me. Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Last Tuesday, of every month. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you later.